I've always been interested in Microsoft's strategy when it comes to advertising. They actually, back in 1996 at Wired, when I was at Wired, that's just a couple years ago, we put Bill Gates on the cover and we said, the world's next great media mogul. Because we predicted, and this was God knows how many years ago, 96 was 10, a lot, 14 years ago. Sorry, 16. We predicted that Microsoft was becoming a media company. It was going to get deep into the media and advertising business in 1996. And with MSN, it has been in the advertising business, but just recently it is doing some very interesting things that is expanding the definition of what it means to be in the advertising business across many devices, many operating systems, and many different opportunities. So here to discuss all of that and more is Rick van der Kooi, the Corporate VP of Advertising for Microsoft. Rick, welcome.
Good morning.
Well, we're having like a shoe-off here. Look at that. Like
yeah, I did notice our matching attires earlier.
Yes, yeah. This is the official uniform of the West Coast. Yes, blazer, white shirt, and tan shoes. So let's get into it. We have so much to talk about. Microsoft has been something of a puzzle, I think, when it comes to advertising. When you think of Microsoft, you often don't think of advertising solutions. First, you think of Office and Windows. You might think of Xbox, which now has quite an advertising attachment, options attached to it. You think of Bing now, right? It was a big push, obviously supported by advertising. But to think of Microsoft as an advertising company still seems a bit, there's a bit of dissonance there. Do you think that's going to change? Do you think that in some point in the future, Microsoft is going to be seen as an advertising-driven company the way Google is seen or Facebook is seen as an advertising-driven company?
Well, Steve would say, make it so.
Steve Ballmer.
Yeah. As in, do your job and then we will become one. I would say, more seriously, I'd say, if you think about the future that we envisage with the new version of Windows, Windows 8, and all the advertising and services opportunities that are going to exist on that platform, then we're definitely going to take a step forward in that direction, and a meaningful step forward. We do, as a company, like the advertising business a lot. And it's sort of a consequence of being what externally is a pretty nice sized business, if you look at it by sort of the industry, advertising industry standards. But compared, of course, to the rest of our business, it's still a smaller portion. But with Windows 8, we do think we're going to really take a step forward.
So let's unpack that. When you say within Windows 8 we're going to take a step forward, what's new that I as a marketer can do with Windows 8 that I couldn't do before?
Well, the first thing we're going to have that you didn't have before is the App Store that we never had before. We had an App Store on our phone. But given our share on phones, that isn't sort of, the most, the largest reach kind of service around. That is quite different with our Windows installed base. We've got about 1.3 billion installed PCs. We'll be selling a lot of licenses of Windows 8 no matter what. And even though many of those are going to go into corporate environments and are going to be used for productivity or work, a lot of people are also going to do their, consumptive activities on the device. And as a result of that, we are going to have a lot of engagement with the App Store.
So you're turning the desktop into an advertising opportunity.
We are, and we're also going to...
I just want to make sure that sinks in, because that's sort of one of the last big bowls of virgin powder in the marketing world, which is the desktop. Yeah. Not the browser, the desktop.
What you're going to see in the startup screen, which again is a totally new experience, and I expect that many people here will have seen previews of what it is going to look like. But in the startup experience, there are going to be a set of consumer apps in the startup experience right there. They are our own apps, and they are going to be ad funded. And so yes, right there on the desktop, you're going to have.
And those are some of those are most of those are content apps, is that right?
They're all content apps.
Yeah.
They're essentially channels, content channels that are just very high quality. We're trying to create really a new paradigm for display advertising with very immersive experiences for consumers and in ways that really bring out the best of what digital advertising can be.
So you're trying new formats, and as I understand it, you have a pilot going with a number of creative agencies as we speak.
Yep.
What have you learned from that?
So far, there is a lot of enthusiasm from the creative agencies that we've been working with. There are 6 that we've been really going deep with in order to make sure that we really bring out great experiences for consumers from the get-go. What people really like are the capabilities that are sort of native to the operating system and that allow people to do things in ads that they couldn't do before.
So you can access the processor, you can access the graphics processor.
Exactly. So really, it just really opens up the capabilities of the operating system and the speed of the operating system that you didn't really have in digital advertising before. So that's one thing. And at Adweek in about a month's time, we're going to be showing a lot of these things. The second thing is just the fact that we now have all these services integrated across the Windows platform. So we're going to have Xbox services on the platform. We're going to have Skype on the platform. And we're going to have these consumptive experiences that we were just talking about. And the ability to then connect advertising experiences across and create that sort of sense of integration and of giving the user sort of one look and feel and one experience across is the second thing that really the creative agencies.
Now, is that really solved? Because one of the things I think about when I think about Microsoft, I spent a fair amount of time up there,
yeah.
is I often go to Microsoft and I end up, well, okay, now I'm over here with the Connect group, which is a group inside of Xbox, which is a campus that's over here. And then I'll go and see you, and I'll see the Advertising Solutions group, or I'll go and see the Bing guys, and then I'll go and see the Windows guys, and then the Office guys, is that there isn't really a way from a point of view of a marketer to connect across all of that and sort of say, here's my campaign, and here's my assets, here's my goal, talk to my one sales rep at Microsoft, and execute across all of them without driving my creative agency crazy where I have to do 16 different creative executions. Is that kind of your goal, or are you there?
It's our goal. And I would say there's sort of 2 things. One, the device is going to help really bring that together in a way that we've never been able to do before.
No, you're talking about the Windows 8 phone or the Surface tablets, or both?
Both. What I'll broadly describe as the Windows 8 device, whether it's a Surface tablet that we develop ourselves or any of the Windows 8 device that our OEM partners are building, are really going to be able to integrate those better than ever before. The second thing is we're working on a set of advertising technologies ourselves, which are what we call polymorphic advertising. And the idea is that you sort of develop
That's going to catch on.
once.
Polymorphic advertising. Right?
Exactly.
Everyone tweet that out.
Polymorphic advertising, where you design and write it once, and then we resize and shape it to the form factor.
Sort of like
and the type
responsive
of
design,
experience.
kind of
That's
in that vein. Yeah.
That's right. And we're actually going to showcase that at Adweek as well. That isn't some kind of, far into the future kind of idea. We fully recognize that a lot of the cost for a marketer is in, the creative and working the creative. And so our help there, I think, is going to be appreciated.
I want to pull back for a second to, I don't know if you saw the Evidon presentation
I did.
about my site where there were 40 some odd trackers. And Most of them were because of my own company, Federated Media. So I'm proud of every one of those pixels, I want you to know. But in fact, it is both an issue and an opportunity that there is that much data both being collected and potentially being put to good use, as well as potentially creating some FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt in the minds of consumers and, frankly, of marketers and publishers. You, and I use that term royally, Microsoft announced, much to the consternation of the advertising industry in June, that the next version of your IE browser will, by default, have do not track set to 1, which means on. So when someone downloads your browser, they will presumptively have a signal to every site they saying, do not track me, right? Now, the reality is that sites are allowed to ignore that until such time as the FTC and others make it regulatory policy to not ignore it. Why did you do that?
If you think about, let's sort of take a step back and unpack it a little bit, as you said. It's sort of our contention that the advertising industry today, the digital advertising industry, isn't really living up to its potential. And you see that in many ways. You see that by the kind of invasive ads that many publishers are putting on their website to make them economically whole, to make their website run. You see that by a lot of the irrelevant ads that are showing up in people's experiences today. And we think that there is an opportunity to create a lot more economic value if you create a deeper trust relationship. You referred to Scott. It was interesting to hear Caroline talk about sort of the trust element. It was interesting to hear Mike Lazaroff talk about sort of the vulnerability and transparency and trust. I think that's very much in alignment with how we're thinking about it, which is in order for us to unlock that value that is today untapped, and we truly believe that to be a multiple of the advertising, the display advertising opportunity today. But if we're able to unpack that and to bring the user in more effectively, then we have a way to create more value for everybody. That's sort of the overall premise that we start from. We tend to think of the industry or of our relationship with consumers today as an advertising industry as here's the purchase funnel and how do we drive the consumer through our purchase funnel. Conrad was sort of showing that earlier on. But the reality is it's the other way around. We're in the consumer's purchase funnel. And we have to understand much better how they are going through that because it's no longer a linear journey through that. And so the only way that we're going to do that is by having them share more about themselves. And you do that by creating greater transparency and trust. And so this is one step in which we are trying to create more transparency and trust by allowing the user to determine what they think should be their setting.
Well, actually, you don't allow the user to determine it. You preset it and don't tell them you've preset it. And one might argue that you're doing it to competitively position yourself against an open web advertising behemoth like Google, because this hurts Google. How do you respond to that?
In the startup screen, when you sort of, out of the box start up the new browser or the new Windows 8, you get, through the Express settings, you get a startup screen that has a pre-check box. But it is a pre-check box and you can uncheck it.
But the pre-check box says, do not track, and if I don't really think very deeply about this, if I'm a standard consumer who isn't as obsessed as you or I are about advertising, I'm thinking, yeah, don't track me. I mean, I'm not like prey on the savannah. And so obviously I would think most people are going to be, I'm sure you run the tests, and I'm pretty sure the tests show 98% people don't uncheck the box, right? So it's sort of, I wonder if we can change the vocabulary from do not trust to, I mean, do not track to earn my trust, or something more appropriate to what the bargain is, because I think the concern, and caveat, I'm on the board of the IAB, so I'm deep in these discussions, and Rick and I have had many great discussions about this. What might happen should IE become 30% of the market or more, which it probably will quite quickly, i.e. 10, plus Safari, we're talking 50% of the market that is sending a signal that could destroy an ecosystem that is probably feeding the children of many people in this room. Please help them.
That is definitely one way of positioning.
I had to try, I had to start somewhere with this, but I mean, I know that you have a sophisticated point of view on this. Where do you think it's going to end up?
Yeah, the implementation is something that I think truly is best done together with the industry as a whole. And in sort of how do we create more of that trust relationship. But I do think, we're on a path here that is sort of inevitable in its direction. And that is mostly driven more by the consumers themselves rather than the regulatory environment. Consumers are demanding that transparency. It doesn't mean that they're going to change necessarily their settings, but they're demanding that transparency. And so I think we're on an inevitable path, and I sort of tend to think of that as the difference between a heretic and a visionary can often be something like 6 to 12 months. But at the end of the day, we're on this path, and we as an industry have to find the right implementations for this. I also think we have to find ways to bring the consumer in because there is more economic opportunity. And so I think that's where we will end up. Implementation aside, and I won't say, we're also not without flaws in, what's the language in your startup screen and what's the impact. But the kind of dialogue that we're now having at the IAB, and the kind of dialogue that I think we're having at the industry will actually help galvanize the energy into that direction. Yeah. And I think that's going to be good.
Good. I think one other argument that one might make that's related to this, the do not track move, but I think that's just sort of a small part of it, is something that I've been writing about for a couple of years now, which is what I'm calling the Internet Big Five. Sort of the largest internet platform companies, of which Microsoft is one. And it strikes me that what's happening there, and I'd like your comment on this, is that the walls are being built up around them. That, well, this is the Windows 8 continent, and we've got a sea around us, and you can come into our continent and do lots of cool things. And then this is the Facebook continent, and this is the Google landmass over here. And over here we've got, Amazon, which is now in the advertising business. And then, of course, there's the holy moat of Apple. And never the five shall connect to the other, right? And so it strikes me that we sort of move towards this world where everyone has to have their strategy and their ad creative and their relationships and their optimization and their metrics and so on with each of those five, almost as if they were five networks, but you don't have the 30-second spot across all of them that allows you the efficiency. Do you see that as a problem or an inevitability of our business?
I do think that the industry is best served by, the ability to connect across and by services that run across.
That includes data.
And that does include data as well. I'll again say user-directed data, but it includes data, of course. You want to build up sort of, a 360-degree view of a user, irrespective of where they are. And users are everywhere. They're not just in these five areas that you describe. But there is something about the ability to do things for users and to provide services that really connect across the services that you provide. It is the philosophy, though, that underlies it that determines whether or not you bring in partners, you make it an open environment, or you make it a closed environment. And ours has fundamentally, as a company, always been one for an open environment. And that is both on the software side as well as on the digital advertising side. And we're not going to change that. Yeah, the work that we have done with Windows 8, with these digital creative agencies, was to say we are opening it up. We provide the technology and the capabilities. You need to now, bring out what the opportunities are for marketers through the creatives that you can build. We didn't say, hey, we're going to build those creatives, and you're going to have to adhere to our standards and specs. So there is, you could say, philosophical differences or implementation differences that sort of sit within that. Right. We are fundamentally more open, even though we've got, something that connects the services together.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because I think the more large companies that take that philosophy and say it publicly in front of everybody, you're all witnesses, as well as hundreds or thousands of people on the live stream. I think it just sort of drives our industry in the right direction, so I appreciate that. We have a few minutes left, and I like to take questions. Rick said he would like to take questions, so if there are questions for Rick, please just raise your hand and I'll repeat them so that the folks on the stream can hear them. I don't know if I can see you, but just gesticulate wildly if you'd like to ask Rick a question. And while I wait to see if anyone's going to be... You're Midwesterners now, come on. I want to ask you a question about... social's been much on everyone's sort of discussion list this morning and will be, I'm sure, this afternoon. You've got a lot of interesting social features across Microsoft. Skype is very social. Xbox has 25 or so million people on Xbox Live, which from my son's point of view is a social network. But you didn't do what Google did and sort of go whole hog into creating a connective tissue of social as they did with Google+. Will that ever come, do you think, or have you punted on that one? In the short term, we're not going to be focusing on that. What we are going to focus on is to have the users and the consumers leverage their social network of choice and then make sure that we connect effectively into that. Social is, in its current version, you sort of have to think about the advertising side of it and just the consumptive experience. But from an advertising perspective, we're in a version 1.0. Mm-hmm. And the ability to truly create social advertising experiences that allow people to share effectively is very much in its infancy. And yes, we're going to do some things with Skype that are new, and we introduced some new ad formats that allow people to share the reviews of their products, etc., more effectively. And we're going to see a lot of innovation still in this area. And we're going to partake in that innovation, and we're also going to, proliferate the social solutions that other companies come up with on our services. That's going to be our approach. Sounds good. No other questions from the audience, because we are close to out of time. Well, actually, we are out of time. Okay, well, warm up, because I'm going to expect questions from you guys as we move through the afternoon. But please join me in thanking Rick for coming here and speaking to us today.